I was going to say to Adrian, that's the best point for Adrian to come in within the update from the engagement subgroup. Okay, over to you, Louise, then.
Okay, I've received apologies from councillors Jackson and Hook, and also Amanda Russell.
Thank you. Anyone got any declarations of interest they'd like to make? Okay, thank you very much. So we need to move on to the minutes of the last meeting, which I've managed to just immediately go and lose just when I needed them. Here we go, I've got them. So looking through the minutes of the last meeting, I'm just seeing if there's any action points along there. No, has anyone got anything to say, or don't need any changes for the minutes of the last meeting? If not, can I have someone to propose the minutes, as I wasn't at that meeting? So Cllr Saunders is proposing the minutes. Can someone second that, please? Anyone who was at the last meeting?
I wasn't at here.
Let's have a look. Who was there then?
I think it was just Councillor Hook.
Yeah, it might be difficult other than Councillor Jackson and Councillor Hook. There are.
Okay.
Can Chris Oswald-Jones second the minutes? Is that as a non-voting member?
Yeah, I can't vote though.
What's the situation there? Do we need to defer approving the minutes, or can we...
You can actually approve the minutes without having been to the meeting.
Oh, right. Okay, I'll second it in that case. Thank you for the offer though, Chris. Okay, so moving on to item 4, the reports from the stand. Really, this is for any of us to comment or mention anything that we feel is relevant that we want to say when we've been on the stand over the past few weeks. Has anyone got any feedback that they feel they need to give? Yeah, Hannah, Councillor Perkin.
I can do a tiny bit of feedback. I think that probably of all the roads in Faversham that I've discussed with people on the stall, Lower Road comes up more than probably any other one. So I think it's probably relevant to feed that into conversation, looking at priorities moving forward. That's one that gets repeatedly brought up as a concern.
Lovely, thank you.
Can I just respond on that, actually?
Yes, go ahead, Adrian.
Interestingly, Hannah, it hardly ever comes up on Commonplace. So we either need to get those comments, it'd be quite good to try and get those comments into Commonplace somehow. But I mean, we can bear it in mind, but I'll come on to the feedback later on anyway.
Did I see you there indicating, Julian?
Well, it was really, I was to support what Hannah said. It's come up when I've been on the stall a lot, and to support what Adrian said, that unfortunately that those concerns aren't getting translated to Commonplace, and it does raise concerns that there are other roads as well where people might have concerns, but they're not putting them on Commonplace.
Yeah, Chris, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I mean, just in a broad sort of sense with the stand, I think it's been very good to engage with people. I think a lot of people have needed reminders that they're aware that the consultation is going, but they haven't, signed or interacted with it. And it's good to reassure people about some of their concerns. I think most of the people I speak to are generally talking about the town as a whole, but there's a few roads. I mean, Bisonwood Road comes up a lot, particularly Dark Hill. People say that they find it difficult getting up Dark Hill at 20 miles an hour, whether that's just through of they're used to doing it, because I think it takes time for people to get used to doing it, and people have concerns again about people speeding on that road. But I think I think we've discussed that kind of area before, because obviously, you know, we've got the crossing by the Stonebridge Pond there and things like that. So it's obviously a road that's kind of been talked about before. But in general, I think most people have been quite well balanced. No one's been too angry about it. I think it's been a very successful kind of exercise to do, really.
Okay, I think though that sort of just demonstrates when we're allowed to get back out and do more of the stall, we'll just have to make sure we continue to hand out those postcards which have got the commonplace link on, to try and encourage more people to put those responses on. And if you do remember any of those people, just hand them out whenever you see them. And that'll be something for us to bear in mind at the latest, hopefully, if we can get out there again in the new year. Yeah, Tim, please go ahead.
Thanks, Eddie. Yeah, I just want to comment on the views coming through about lower roads that aren't being picked up on commonplace. And I think it indicates that different people prefer to make comments in different ways. And maybe it's an opportunity to remind ourselves that we brought commonplace in to add to activities that pre-lockdown were taking place through the kind of market stall activities. Now we've got commonplace, we I guess just got to remember that, first of all, we can't rely on it entirely because not everyone is digitally connected. And secondly, given that this is really valuable feedback, how do we record it? Maybe this is a question for Adrian to take away and think about. How do we systematically, use this evidence alongside the digital evidence coming through commonplace, so we've got a picture in the round? I'm playing bingo this evening as well, everyone. As our chair knows, every instance of the word road loses a point. When you change the word road to street, it reminds them that they're places for things other than cars. So I'll mention that.
Hope you don't get a full house this evening, Tim.
I think with regard to lower street, Tim.
+2.
No, we've got a couple of ways to do it. Either we need to just add it in manually, so we need to get these comments in, just note them down separately, or we do have survey mode, which we can input the same comments into commonplace as a surveyor. So if people have got feedback from the stalls, which they've taken in person, and if they could feed those into Louise, then Brooke could actually put the data in manually by in survey mode.
So is the best thing, do we need a form to have on the stall so that we can fill it in and pass it on to Brooke, Adrian?
That's one way of doing it, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Chris Williams.
Just a quick one. I'm not sure where I discussed this with somebody, but whether is it possible? I know we can't have people touching things at the moment. It's not really practical. But is it possible to have a laptop or a tablet on the stall so if somebody wants to feedback something and they want to tell you then and there, that we can actually do it with them, actually show them, we can do it with them. I know it's time consuming, but it might be a good way of it might work for the consultation as well if somebody wants to just quickly say, a comment on that. But I don't know if that's possible under the circumstances.
Councillor Cllr Saunders.
Thank you, Chair. I think, in fact, we do have a form already which people on the stall can use with visitors just to record what their concern is. So I think we can, when we can start again, we can start to take feedback on Faversham streets in relation to the things that people are concerned about. Thank you.
Can I suggest we share that form with Adrian just to check we're going to be recording the right information that we need then to input onto Commonplace when we hand the forms back over to Brooke. So do you have the forms, Louise?
Is Councillor Saunders, are you talking about the form that is the virtually the survey that's already on there, which I think we've shown to Adrian anyway?
Yeah, so if it's the same one, I've seen it.
Ah, so if that's fine to use, then we'll make sure it's more prominent and that all the people on the stall are more aware of it. Good. Okay. So that, sorry about that, shuffling around here. We'll move on then to the update on publicity materials. I'll start with a few bits that I'm aware of. So we still have a variety of A4 and A3 posters available. We still got, as far as I can tell, plenty of bin stickers. And we've got the postcards, you know, the Say Yes to the KCC consultation postcards. I was speaking with, I think it was Julian, Cllr Saunders and Louise and Adrian last week, and the community leaders signed support letters. We thought we'd hold on to them until January because of the other letters that have gone out to schools. So we're going to hold back on those and start collating them in the new year. It thought it'd be a different thing to collect and a different thing to put out on our social media, showing the signature support of, I don't know, the head of a certain school or the manager of a nursery. So that's that one. The other thing that has happened recently is the KCC funded car park metal A3 posters. Adam Andrews, the town facilities manager, has gone around and put those up. You will see them, although some of them have had to be put up at a certain height because the signs are made of metal. Has anyone got anything else they want to update us on with regard to publicity materials? Yeah, Cllr Saunders, Julian.
It's more under the general heading of publicity, but we have an article in the next town council newsletter, particularly encouraging people to respond to the consultation. There's all, Adrian will be able to talk about it more, but there's also KCC are also going to run a 20's Plenty competition in schools. And the other thing I think is worth mentioning to people is, although quite a bit of the start of the Cycle Fest has been blown away by the renewed lockdown, we are due to have a webinar about encouraging people or kind of addressing the reasons why people don't cycle on Thursday the 19th, so 2 weeks today. So that's something to look out for, and we'll be starting to publicise that fairly soon. And we've got a couple of basically national speakers who happen to live locally from the main national cycling organisations answering questions at that.
Hey, Councillor Hannah Perkin.
Apologise if you can hear my son in the background. I was just going to say, obviously, because we've gone back into a lockdown, is it worth looking at opening some of the budget to do a little bit of internet advertising, so through social media outlets? If that webinar sounds really great, and it might be that if we boosted a few Facebook posts or something to try and reach out to more people, because you can manage to get that quite, with algorithms, you can manage to get that down to quite a specific target. So it might be quite good in terms of reaching out to people that might not necessarily see it normally, to advertise through social media.
How do other members of the committee feel about using social media, Facebook, to promote the webinar that Hannah suggested? Oh, yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Thanks, Eddie. I'm really supportive of this. And I think if we can really boost attendance through social media engagement, the more the merrier. So yeah, gets my vote.
Councillor Barker.
So on a practical level, I suspect it's incredibly effective, and I think that's what we need it to be as a group. On a personal level, I think Facebook is inspired by the devil, and we're actually funding people who quite happily and openly make political capital, make actually financial capital out of political misadventure. And I think Facebook is a really god-awful platform, and funding it I find ethically abhorrent. I suspect I should put that opinion to the back of my mind and work on what's effective for 20's plenty.
Councillor Williams.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've done these sort of boosts for work before, and they you know, when you target it well, they do have a good reach. I suppose you know, we've obviously seen the kind of potential negative. Well, you obviously get positives and negatives, all these things, but I mean, unfortunately, the minority sometimes can overwhelm a thing. But I think we don't need to dwell too much on it, because I think, again, it is a minority that tends to sort of have the narrative on these Facebook posts. But I think the people that read it, that are open-minded, who, even if they disagree, won't necessarily comment, but they at least, it's there in front of them. So I think it might be, you know, particularly over this month when we can't really do a lot else, it's probably in the short term a good way of doing it. I do share Councillor Barker's feelings with Facebook. I mean, I hate it myself. I can't really get off of it. I think it's like sort of some stuck to my phone and my life. But it's kind of, it's an effect. It can be an effective tool sometimes. So in me saying all of that, as I said, I think in the short term I would support it, just to kind of get that out there, really.
Adrian.
Got a couple of initiatives going. One is with the Faversham Society. We're going to put an article in there, I presume it'll be the Christmas version, which I hope will have some effect. And I was hoping to be able to follow that up with a Zoom webinar with them as well, where I think there's probably some support. I just wanted to talk a bit more about the schools project. There's plans for a poster stroke poem competition, which KCC are running in Tunbridge, particularly for primary school children. And the thought was that we would do something similar here in Faversham, and we're fairly well advanced with that project. So they'll go out to the idea is they'll go out to schools once the mayor's current competition is finished, with the aim of having responses back by the middle of December, and then winners announced in January. The objective of that is really twofold. One is to be able to get through to the parents of the students the importance of 20 miles an hour, so try and influence them and to get their thoughts about submitting their responses to the consultation. And then the second piece is really about providing some collateral, because we can use as a basis for an exhibition in the town hall, and also we can produce some banners using their artwork. So I think there's a couple of initiatives which are possible. And it may well be that actually we don't want to do too much on social media, sort of this side of Christmas, and maybe review in January as to where we are. Once and then we'll have a better feedback then on what the support and opposition levels are for the scheme.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Okay, in that case, I'm going to propose that myself and Cllr Saunders liaise with Louise, the town clerk, on boosting specific posts from the Town Council Facebook page that relate to 20's Plenty. We'll pick that up in our meeting that we have on Wednesday. And from what I understand, the cost of boosting isn't excessive, and we can limit the amount of budget that we spend on that. Has anyone got any objections on the committee for that? Okay, we'll keep you updated on the progress on that front. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to item 6, which is an update on the highways work that I will kick off with. Please bear with me. This is a recap and just a summary of where we are, just for the benefit of all of us, just to make sure there's no gaps in knowledge. And please step in and correct me if anyone thinks I've got it wrong. Okay, so Faversham's scheme has been implemented as an experimental traffic order financed by Central Government's Department for Transport. Now, this funding did have a time limit by which it had to be spent and the scheme installed. Therefore, there was not time to create all the details of the original designs. However, enough has been done for the scheme to be experienced and consulted on. So what has been done so far under this experimental traffic order? Firstly, we've had 20-mile-an-hour signage put up all around the town, at the gateways, and about 300 repeater discs spread across the town. Next, we've got 20-mile-an-hour roundels, and they're the 20-mile-an-hour signs that are painted on the road. We have at least 30 of those, probably more, as an enforcement stroke reminder for drivers. So that's sort of helping us with enforcing 20 miles an hour and reminding people of what the 20-mile-an-hour limit is as well, because a lot of drivers tend to see the road ahead of them rather than the signs that are around them. The gateways were installed, but not yet the detail of the gateway build-outs. The planters that went up at the main gateways are a temporary substitute for the build-outs and are there to emphasise that drivers are entering a different speed limit zone. So that's the work that's been done so far. So next, we should be aware of and considering the interventions from the outline drawings that can be considered to bolster the effectiveness of the scheme to achieve more drivers keeping within the 20-mile-an-hour limit and facilitating more cyclists and pedestrians. So these interventions are, and these are the ones that were on the outline drawings from Phil Jones: centre line removal across the whole town, but that excludes junctions; staggered parking with pedestrian build-outs on Newton Road; a walking path from Napleton Road to the recreation ground, when that includes build-outs, dropped curbs and coloured surface pedestrian crossing points. Then we got the Ethelbert Road School build-out area. Then we get to Lower Road, which Councillor Perkin was speaking about earlier on. Lower Road, the junctions, or the corners at the junctions, have got build-outs, and the build-outs as such, they're designed to reduce the traffic speed at the junctions on Lower Road. And the design includes trees and dropped curb crossing points on Lower Road. And the last part of the design and the outline drawings are the all-road speed cushions. I mean, things can change, but that was what was on the original outline drawings. If everyone's okay with that, I'm going to move on to an update from the public, the engagement subgroup. Tim, yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Eddie. Just to clarify, you said at the beginning that for the reasons of the experimental order timescale, not everything in the drawings could be implemented. Apologies if I just missed it, but in giving that list, is that a list, is anything on that list going to be implemented imminently, or is that a list of those items that have yet to be implemented?
They're a list of the items that were on the outline drawings but haven't been implemented, but the ones I think we should be considering implementing, but unfortunately there's no plans at the moment for them to be implemented. So later on our agenda, under item, where are we now? Item 8, we can have another look at that and see where we're going to be going with what else we're going to be doing.
Thank you.
Cheers, Tim. Thank you. Okay, so we're on to item 6, item 7, the update from the public engagement subgroup. Thank you, Julian. Cllr Saunders.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the last meeting of the community engagement group was two weeks ago, and we what you've just covered in your in the summary you gave us there is quite helpful, because it fits in with some of the things that were picked up at the community engagement group. So at the last meeting, which I think most people who attended the meeting are on this meeting now, we had from Adrian some feedback on Commonplace, which I'm sure he can talk to. But we then looked at taking the list, the Phil Jones list of interventions, and how that might be married up with the feedback we're getting from Commonplace. And the outcome of the discussion was that we agreed that some work needed to be done on that to develop a final list, which could then be given to KCC to cost out for us, and could potentially be then put in our operational plan for next year, and obviously the cost could go into our budget for next year, and it would be a shopping list then to try and attract funding from KCC and other sources. So that was quite a long, detailed discussion. And I think some of that work is now going on. I know Eddie and Adrian have been meeting to look at that. So I think that's the main thing to report. So I think in terms of this meeting, it would be good if the meeting could confirm they're kind of happy with that activity and direction of travel.
Lovely. Thank you, Julian. And we'll come back to that when we're looking at the next steps in item 8. Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Barker. Or you're on mute.
Sorry, was just checking I was on mute or not. Thank you, Chair. I was wondering that when I joined this committee, and hopefully now I'm kind of on it properly, I've seemed to have been missed of a few meeting invites of late. Hopefully I'm on them more formally now. When I joined this committee, it was the sort of change of the civic year, and it was, I think, just before we got, or just around the time we got notice that we would move to sort of experimental traffic order. And at that point, it was felt that it was worth having a kind of communications subgroup, because we had a short space of time to let the town know what was happening, and we had a lot of work to undertake to do that and to engage the town. I'm kind of feeling now that we're moving into a period where it becomes a kind of a standard delivery now. We're in the midst of the consultation, and that the consultation's due to finish in March, but yet unhelpfully not enact on that consultation until June. But I'm just wondering the value of splitting out communications now from this committee and I'm wondering if it shouldn't all be brought back together again, and that we should start to collectively manage all issues through this committee. I don't think we have the urgency and the cadence needed now around communications to separate them out. It might well mean the expansion of this meeting, but I don't think there's that urgency, and I think it would be perhaps better that, you know, all those discussions are held with everyone together. It's just a thought. I'm happy to back down on that, but I'd, you know, happily propose that we fold them back in. That's not to sort of do the fantastic work that Cllr Saunders has been doing in that subcommittee, and that the subcommittee's created and worked through. I think it's been a very valuable thing to have done, but I just wonder whether it's worth folding them back in together now.
I mean, all members have, I think, always been invited to the subgroups. We can just make sure, I guess, from now on that an official invite goes out to everyone to attend the subgroup, and we can be covering similar agenda items that we cover in the main meeting as well. I don't know how people feel about that. Yeah, Cllr Saunders, Julian.
I mean, I think what Councillor Barker is saying has a lot of merit. I think we want to avoid having too many meetings, and I think we have gone through a stage of having to do a lot in a short period of time, particularly over the summer, and at that stage it was helpful to have the community engagement group meeting very regularly. I think I would, for the moment, think there's still a value in retaining the community engagement group and making sure it reports back thoroughly to this group. And I think the reason for that is, as this is a public committee where we're really making decisions, and I think still quite a lot of what we're doing in the community engagement group is more a kind of brainstorming, trying to find a way through a designing of things. So it's more of a working group activity, where this is clearly a you know, however informal, it is a public committee. So I think for the moment, my view is that there would still be a value in retaining that. But I think, you know, Councillor Thomas is very right. We need to make sure that everyone on the committee, and indeed other councillors, if they've got an interest, can participate in the community engagement group.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead. Chris Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll back up what Councillor Saunders was saying there. I feel it's quite important to keep a working party going with the peripheral stuff, which can then be concentrated back into the committee. It is merited, actually, that the full committee members, councillors, are invited to join in with the subgroup, but I feel it's important to keep the subgroup going. And if I may just cover something else we mentioned earlier, which is the community table. The suggestion that people, general public, are reluctant to sit down and write forms out at the table. The suggestion, I believe, had already been made a couple of months ago, that with the laptop at the table and a dedicated one of us, probably not me, someone that's quick typing, to summarise the points that various individual public are making into the format that we want to receive it, would be a good idea.
Thank you, Chris. So from that, I think what I'm going to suggest then is the only change we'll make with regard to the subject group is confirming that the invites have actually gone out to all members of this committee, and any councillor who contacts Louise to say that they wish to receive an invite to the subgroup meetings. And the frequency of all these meetings will be reviewed by myself and Julian, Councillor Saunders, ongoing to see what's the most appropriate frequency. Okay, and the other thing, going back to what Mr. Chris Oswald-Jones just said about the form, I think it's worth double checking that the form definitely covers it. So if I can ask Louise, the town clerk, just to send me a copy of it through, and we'll pick up on that on our catch-up meeting on the Wednesday to see how we feel about that. My understanding with the form is that it will be filled out by one of the people on the stall and not actually by the member of the public themselves. We could consider having a laptop down there, but I'm not 100% convinced about that. But if someone really feels strongly that we should, then we can consider that when we get the stall going again after this current lockdown, whenever that might end. Yeah, so Chris, go ahead. Oswald-Jones.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Survey mode comes to mind on the laptop.
Yes, I think, well, we can do it in survey mode because Adrian's highlighted that. And I'm sure Adrian can share with myself and whoever else needs to know on how that works. And it's just weighing up whether it's worth having the laptop on the stand or whether we're better off feeding the forms back to Brooke to enter the data.
Without the laptop, we're missing an opportunity.
For
what? Again, without the laptop facility, we're missing the opportunity. We need a dedicated person to sit, listen and type, but we're missing the opportunity.
I don't know, maybe I misunderstood. I thought the plan was that we'd use the form, the people on the stand would listen to the person coming up and who couldn't enter it at home, and they'd write the data on the form, and then the form would go up to Brooke to enter the data.
Either, but the idea of someone with a laptop actually on the table would cut out the treble handling.
We'll have to look. I mean, I haven't had a look on filling it out, so I don't know how easy or straightforward that is. We'll make a note of it and we'll have a look at the practicalities of that. But definitely as a fallback position, we'll have the form and collect the data to go to Brooke, but we will consider having a laptop on the stall when we got people out there. Thank you, Chris. Okay. Adrian, do you want to come in and, in fact, can I just come in briefly with something before I let you come in, Adrian? Just want to step in slightly with regard to item 8. Councillor Hook is going to write to KCC, Jamie Watson, to find out whether KCC have any further plans for additions to the scheme before the end of the consultation period, which is the end of February, beginning of March. I phoned Jamie Watson today to talk to him about those planters at Bisingwood Road near Sainsbury's, and they are going to be relocated to give more room for traffic there. And while I was speaking to Jamie, I asked him about what happens after the consultation has closed. And he said that at the end of the consultation, i.e. end of February, beginning of March, KCC Highways, or basically himself, will be compiling and writing a report that will be sent to the June 2021 JTB with the recommendations for the JTB at Swale to review. So we're going to have a bit of a gap coming up there. And once Adrian's spoken, we need to be considering how we can improve the town for cyclists and pedestrians, whatever the outcome of the JTB. So my suggestion is we look at things that we could potentially find funding for and implement irrelevant of the outcome of the consultation. But for now, before I carry on that one, I'm going to ask Adrian to brief us on the report or the form he's been working on based on all the data he's been collating from Commonplace. Thank you, Adrian.
Can I share my screen? I think I can. So what we have so far today, we've had about 1,800 visitors to the site, which is good. We've had 800 contributions, of which 350 are direct comments, and then there's some 470 agreements with those. So that gives an idea of the volumes which we've had, which I think is pretty good. If I can just get to the right place. Sorry. And I hope you can still, can you see the map now? Can you see the map?
Yes.
Good. So what this shows is that we've had a lot of contributions from all over the town. So it's not concentrated in one particular area, although there are areas of concentration. You can see we had a lot of comments on Bisingwood Road, particularly up here around the planters. We've had a lot of comments on Whitstable Road as well, in particular, and then quite a few on Ospringe Street, Ospringe Road, and the Mall and Forbes Road. So, but you can see that the comments are pretty widely spread. What I've worked on with Eddie, I think I need to stop sharing this and start again. Is we've started to cross-reference those comments against the list of interventions that Eddie was talking about earlier. And you can see that in the first, we've got quite a lot of the enhanced gateways and planters have been implemented in various places. So you can see that down up St Anne's Road and Preston Grove and so on, we've got the external gateways plus the external enhanced gateways there. You can see over in the next columns, these are the set of proposed implementations which have not yet been done. It says yes because there's an intervention proposed but hasn't been implemented yet. And then we've started to cross-reference those against the number of mentions on Commonplace. So you can see, for example, Bisingwood Road, there's some 17 mentions on Commonplace. And then what we've also done is we've started to look at the where we haven't got particular, we might have a centre line removal, for example, on Davington Hill, but there have been various comments about pedestrian crossings and needed there. So we've started to put that as a potential new intervention. And if we go down the bottom here, these are areas which may not have been, either were not in the original scheme, or people have started to make, people have made comments that more interventions are needed. Over here, these show you the number of mentions including agreements, and you can see that Whitstable Road is by far and away the highest the highest road that's been mentioned. Together with quite a lot on the A2. If you look at this three parts of the A2, and actually together all of those are probably the highest mention. But of course that's outside the 20 mile an hour, current 20 mile an hour scheme. These are not in order simply because these are, I can't do that, I couldn't do it like that. Saxon Road gets quite a lot of mentions, Athelston Road, South Road and Ospringe Road. And I think those are the main areas. So what we're doing is say we're cross-referencing those comments against the interventions that Phil Jones has planned. And I think it would be quite good if we could think about asking Phil to review what the comments we've got, so that we can come up with some sort of priority about what would be the most, what would give the most value in terms of benefits to people against the, and what would be easiest and or most cost effective to do. Did you want anything else, or is that enough? And so I could take some questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Adrian. You can take questions. Has anyone got anything they wanted to ask Adrian? Okay, in that case, what I'm going to do is, on the information we've just shared there, Adrian's been collating areas on where most people want improvements around the town. So we've got that information. The other thing we're going to have to start bearing in mind is the fact that we're not going to get an answer, I believe, from the current data. And I think Julian and I have got a meeting with KCC on Tuesday, so we can clarify this with them, is that we're not going to get an answer on whether the scheme's going to be made permanent or not until the June Swale Joint Transport Board. So I had a look, and or someone had suggested to me and highlighted that the Road Safety Trust have recently increased their maximum grant to 200k. That's their major themed grants, and that round opens in February 2021. My suggestion is that we look to try and make a successful bid based on Phil Jones's designs for the crosstown walking route from Napleton Road over to the recreation ground, which includes drop curbs, build outs and highlighted pedestrian crossing points, and they'd be on South Road, Bank Street, Preston Street, Newton Road, St Mary's Road, St John's and Park Road. This crosstown walking route could go in irrelevant of what the JTB decision is, and it would fulfill our aims of a healthier, cleaner and safer town. So that is something I was going to suggest to the committee. Also, as Adrian has said and Julian Cllr Saunders has said, we want to commission Phil Jones to assess what our next priorities could be. Fingers crossed, once the scheme is made permanent. I'm going to invite members of the committee to come in now, please. Who wants to go first? Cllr Saunders?
Okay, well, briefly, I think, trying to find other sources of funding for both kind of trying to implement the whole of the Phil Jones design is good, but also in the longer term, obviously, finding additional funding for other improvements to help walking and cycling will be good. So providing, you know, what we want to do meets the criteria of the Road Safety Fund, I think it would be a good thing to pursue. It's just a short aside, but you were unable to attend, but along with Councillor Alistair Gould, I attended a session earlier this week with some people who are working for Swale on the kind of active transport element of the local plan, and they were very interested in the Phil Jones design and what we were doing with the 20's Plenty scheme. And I mean, it's not a short-term possibility, but certainly because, you know, the borough is likely to commit itself to trying to have a modal change in the way that people travel within the area. There could also be the possibility of, you know, looking towards Section 106 funds in the longer term to enhance the scheme.
Thank you. Tim Stoner.
Thanks, Eddie. Well, first a comment on Commonplace, if I may. I just think what Adrian showed us there illustrates very well the usefulness of the method and the fact that we can draw from it not only responses to the 20's Plenty campaign and project, but also, as you said, for example, for the A2, it's outside the 20's Plenty boundary, but it's still providing valuable insights that can inform this discussion about how we can improve walking and cycling in Faversham, regardless of whether or not the 20's Plenty scheme survives the consultation. And I hope and expect it will, but the fact that it is going to take some time, I think also speaks to the need of doing something in parallel within and outside the 20's Plenty boundary, and to demonstrate that 20's Plenty isn't the be all and end all. It was only ever the foundations, which I think reminds me, Julian, of the meeting that we were in with Alistair Gould and Swale Borough Council officer the other day, where we were talking about walking and cycling in Faversham. And out of that came a list of areas where we could make improvements in parallel with the 20's Plenty scheme. And I went through that list, if you remember, Julian, and I think it was taken away to consider further. So I'll just run through it again, because actually, Eddie, I think the west to east walking route's a really powerful idea, but I just want to set it in the context of a broader set of ideas. Regardless of whether it's 20 miles an hour or 30, there are opportunities for further build outs, narrowing in effect the roadway that's available for vehicles and widening the footway, and giving drivers the sense of the narrowness of the roadway that just encourages them to slow down, whether the sign is 30 or 20. We've done it with the build outs. I'm concerned that, I don't know if there's time or whether now is the opportunity to talk about what's happened at Sainsbury's, because the planter was put in on the wrong side of the roadway. And I think a lot of the complaints may be related to it being missited rather than not being put in properly. But I'll let you, take us there if you want to in a moment. And having done it with planters, you can then follow up in the long term by physically moving the curb to narrow the roadway. I also said alongside, that was my first point. My second point was speed cushions, such as we've had for many years on the Whitstable Road, not sleeping policemen, not, speed bumps, which do, jar the back and annoy everyone, but speed cushions, which if you drive carefully and slowly enough, you pretty much avoid. So you don't bump at all. They are really good cost-effective measures. So for example, we're still seeing some high speeds on North Lane, North Road, South Road, Ospringe. Speed cushions would help address those sorts of speeding events. So that was my second point. And an expensive version of a speed cushion is a speed table. And that's what we have just outside here down Napleton Road, but much more expensive. Really effective, but much more expensive. Point 3 was tightening the turning radii at street intersections. Mm-hmm. So Faversham has very many, very wide, broad turnings. So as you travel down Forbes Road, you can swing into Athelston and barely slow down. That's a very sort of 20th century traffic engineering led way of planning streets, which allows you basically to let the bin lorry turn at the same time as a hearse, at the same time as a coach, and let them all get through the junction at the same time. Not thinking about pedestrians and cyclists, thinking about big wheeled vehicles, old school thinking. So we can tighten those down, and there are very many well tried and tested, as Adrian will know, Phil will know, urban design measures for doing that at relatively low cost. In the first instance, you paint the turning radius and trick people into thinking it's tighter, but you can follow up with granite sets and so on. So that was point 3. There's only one more point, which is pedestrian crossings. And I think that then speaks to the concept that you've put forward, Eddie, which is that this east to west route is a series of pedestrian crossings over South Road and then progressively across town. In doing so, it would encourage walking on a route that the historians and archaeologists believe has probably been there for millennia, predates what we see in Faversham. Any building is younger than that route. That route is fantastically old, and I think would therefore be very appropriate in a historic town like Faversham to be reinforced, celebrated, made known about. There is a risk, though, that if that's put in, the kinds of pedestrian crossings that are proposed in Phil's drawings are informal crossings. They would be a change of surface material as you cross South Road. We're not talking about putting pelican crossing, zebra crossings, or any of the like in. And I think that would need to be tested, and Jamie and KCC will be able to provide feedback. But my experience is traffic officers get nervous about doing that sort of thing in a 30-mile-an-hour environment. One of the great benefits of 20 is it makes it much easier to do that sort of scheme. So I would just test that, Eddie, against whether or not it might survive a sort of regression back to 30 miles an hour. But in principle, I really support it. Politically, maybe with a little p, it does cross wards in Faversham, but it doesn't cover all of our wards. Does it get into Watling Ward at its eastern end? Is it just getting in there?
It does at the moment, but we could extend it all the way to Love Lane over the long, across the Wreck, over the Long Bridge.
And I don't think it hits Priory, Old Davington Ward.
No.
And I just wonder, for the sake of the little p and big P politics, but actually the perception of the town, whether there might be something else which also covers all of Faversham's wards, which from a communications perspective shows a comprehensive approach rather than anyone saying, oh, they're just favouring one or the other of the wards.
I mean, now you mention that, Tim, it could be extended eastwards and it would end in Watling Ward, and as soon as it gets onto Bisingwood Road, that is Priory Road. Actually, the whole of Bisingwood Road is Priory, strangely enough. Because someone else,
if you were to swing it down Napleton, swing it down Tanners, and take it across a new pedestrian crossing at Stonebridge, then you've got a 4-ward scheme. And as it gets into Watling, you keep going, it ends up into the Duchy lands.
That's right, yeah.
So it could actually be Faversham past, present, and future.
Yeah, it could be good starting it at the Gunpowder Works and taking it, from in the west all the way over to the east, as you say. Lovely, thank you. I think I've got Chris Barker next. Councillor Barker.
Sorry, just coming off mute. A couple of observations for me and possibly questions, really. I mean, I don't want to get feedback. I don't want to get into an existential debate necessarily, but I mean, it strikes me that we've got a sort of confluence of things coming here. One is that we're in the midst of a consultation from a semi-complete 20's plenty scheme, and that we won't know the outcome of that consultation, although we clearly all hope that that's going to be positive and are going to do all that we can to try and make it so, but that we won't know the outcome of that until June. And it strikes me that considerations about kind of spend and investment probably need to bear that in mind. I mean, if there are other external forms of funding that we can get to kind of move an ever persistent walking and cycling agenda outside of that traffic scheme, then that feels like a good and reasonable ambition for this group as well. But I'm minded by the fact that we're called 20's Plenty and not the Faversham Walking and Cycling Committee. And and I guess that's just a thing about scope, but I think we'd all agree that it's not unreasonable that we are looking at transportation of all ilks, and that, you know, improving the lot of a walker or cyclist in Faversham is a good thing to do. I do think some elements, though, we need to kind of consider outside of the geographical boundaries of the existing 20s plenty scheme. And so kind of elements that start to creep into considerations around Watling Street, for example, feel to me that they might be best taken up and managed and considered within the neighbourhood plan delivery, because, you know, that potentially has you know, the opportunity to kind of introduce policies that have to be, you know, affected or delivered by developers in, you know, the south of the A2 and so on. And that, I guess what I'm saying is it would probably be good to clarify our scope. Are we extending beyond the 20s plenty traffic order to walking and cycling, which I don't think is a bad thing, but could we or should we constrain that to the area in which the traffic order exists, and that outside those boundaries consider that more within the neighbourhood plan? And, you know, personally, I am in favour of looking for kind of external funding routes and improving the lot of walker and cyclist, and don't think this committee, I think this committee is probably the right area to do so. A second thing that kind of occurs to me is I'm, you know, I think, I don't know how everyone else feels, I'm kind of very reluctant at this point to commit the town to funding of any major traffic considerations, certainly those put forward by Phil Jones, unless the consultation was positive. I mean, it would feel to me that, and or, you know, we were getting funding from KCC or somebody else. I'll be more clear and specific. I would personally be reticent to look to Faversham Town Council to seek, you know, public works loans or funding until we were on a firmer footing, long-term committed implementation of the 20s plenty scheme. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be, and I think actually we very much should be, spending a lot of time and effort between here and there, so that is June, on ensuring we get a positive outcome to the scheme, but also investigating, as I think, you know, everyone's alluded to so far, but in various different guises, you know, investigating the costs of those components, so that we can understand what, you know, what funding we're seeking, whether either through Faversham Town Council or KCC, and whether there is any kind of question about prioritisation of those kind of activities. I think those two things, i.e. the continued promotion and driving of a positive outcome for the consultation, and seeking a detailed kind of bill of materials or whatever for each of the future major traffic implementations, I think are both two really good exercises to do from here. Sorry for the meander.
Thank you, Councillor Barton. Did I see you wanted to come in, Councillor Williams? I wasn't sure if your hand was up or not.
Yes, no, I did, thank you. I just wanted to make a few points on the sort of funding side of the discussion. I think the roads, I think it was the Road Safety Trust you mentioned, Chair, but I think that potential funding for this sort of cross walkway across town is very positive, and I think, as you say, you know, regardless of what happens with the 20-mile-an-hour limit, it's something that fits in with our priorities as a town council, you know, from a walking and cycling perspective, but also the climate and biodiversity, the sort of climate emergency to try and reduce, you know, people using vehicles. So I think that's definitely worth worth looking at. You know, my feeling as well is this is where it kind of crosses and what Councillor Barker was saying about the kind of walking and cycling fitting into this committee, because you know there's a lot of opportunities with these walkways and build outs for and I know some of them mentioned about trees, but there's other biodiversity or kind of climate mitigation methods that could be integrated where other committees can come on, like climate and biodiversity, possibly funding streams from other committees that can fit into that, even if, say, for example, KCC or wasn't something that they would fund. It might be something that the town council can fund on some elements. But then there's other environmental potential funding streams that we could look at and grants for some of those things. With the whole kind of uncertainty of whether it's a permanent scheme or not, I think the sort of commissioning Phil Jones to come back in, sort of give us a it was mentioned earlier about sort of a almost a kind of a plan of how the next phase can be implemented, assuming that the consultation is in a positive light, would give us as a committee and as a council a bit of an idea of where we could go. Because I think, I speak for myself, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know, looking at a lot of the things, I look at them and I have no idea what the aspirations could be and what the best course of action would be. But clearly somebody who does know it can come back with something that's kind of saying, okay, well, these are the realistic costings and things you can do with the funding you've got or can get available, unless I've misinterpreted that, but that's how I feel.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Councillor Williams. So from that discussion, I'm going to propose that we pick up on Adrian and Councillor Julian Saunders' suggestion of commissioning Phil Jones to have a look at what we might be considering next, i.e. reviewing our current scheme, looking at the amount of feedback we've had on specific areas and getting some direction from Phil Jones as to where we might go next, but also to ask Phil Jones of his opinion of whether or not the cross-town walkway is a good thing to do next, or whether he's got a better idea. So it's pretty much an open assessment. And also, as Tim Stoner has said, we need to consider KCC's response as the Highways Authority to the crosstown walkway, if, God forbid, the consultation was to fail. I really hope it doesn't, and I personally don't think it will. I think it will get approved. However, we need to take that into consideration, and I know that we will, Julian and I, when we're meeting KCC on Tuesday, will confirm the update I gave you today, i.e. that we're not going to know for sure until June next year, because that is going to influence our plan and how we move forward and what we do in the interim. Anyone who is against that proposal of what we do next? Okay, so that's what we will do, is initially contact Phil Jones and ask him to do that assessment for us and ask for his opinion on whether the walking route across town is a good starting point. Again, because we've got to think of things that potentially could be done either in a 20 mile an hour or a 30 mile an hour zone. But also I pick up on what Tim Stoner says. We may well feel as though tightening some of the corners in town would be a good safety thing to do, come what may, particularly the Forbes Road, Athelston Junction, which is hell to try and cross if you're a pedestrian. So we can explore all those things. Nothing's definite and nothing's for certain, but we just need to start exploring options that we might be able to pick up on over the next few months, bearing in mind that we won't have confirmation on the whole scheme until June next year. Okay, final item on the agenda was the budget review, and you will have had that document come through in the pack, which showed us or the money we've spent this year. And where are we now? I believe we need to confirm our continuation of the skills of Adrian Berendt to carry on. So I'm proposing we continue to commission Adrian Berendt up until the end of at least the end of the consultation at the moment. Has anyone got any comments on that, please? Excellent. Can I ask Louise there, with that in mind, will there be any additions that need to be added to that budget report, or how much we spent this year?
The only thing, will PJA charge for the assessment that you just mentioned? Will there be a fee for that? I
believe so. And from this, we are aware of what our budget is this year, and we can pick up on it again on this Wednesday and confirm with Adrian on how much we can afford to spend with Phil Jones.
Mm.
If that's okay with you, Adrian, we'll pick that up on Wednesday in our catch-up discussion on what we're going to be spending on that. But it will definitely be within our budget, and we just got to consider what else we might want to spend this year's budget on, i.e. if we're going to ask Phil Jones to do anything else, how much that might cost us. If the rest of the committee is okay to leave that to myself, Cllr Saunders, Adrian and Louise to pick up on our catch-up when we catch up on what's been going on and dot the I's and cross the T's. Any objections to that, please? Okay, thank you all very much. Has anyone got any questions with this year's budget? We did notice, or did note for next year's, I'm going to suggest at the moment we simply think about, based on this year's expenditure, what sort of expenditure we might expect for next year. We are going to have to make this decision. When are we finalising the budget, Louise?
Officially, the budget actually doesn't get finalised until January meeting, but obviously it's discussed during November and December. Okie
dokie. So that's something we'll have to talk about as a town council, getting all the councillors involved. Without any more information, my aim would be to at least continue with the budget that we've had this year and have it replicated for next year. But that was something we'll have to discuss with the rest of the town council. Has anyone got any points they want to raise about the budget at the moment? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything else that I haven't had on the agenda? Any other business or points that we should? Yes, Mr. Oswald Jones. Chris.
Thank you, Eddie. Yes, I'm not sure this would fall into the remit for the 20's Plenty Committee, but it's just the topic. I'll mention it. There's at some point the subject of Love Lane, the concept of getting the speed limit reduced from 40 down to 30. At some point, where do we raise that?
We can do that, and to be honest, I think that's something that I can ask a question on very quickly, because I know we can do that through Swale, of getting the speed limit reduced from 40. Definitely we can get it cut down to 30 in the short term for what we've got at the moment. So particularly with all the houses that are being built down there. I will email Mike Knowles and find out if that's something he can get the ball rolling on, because I think we all agree that that road's far too fast. Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. It's just something I've remembered I should have picked up earlier. The 2 planters on Bisingwood Road that's got to be taken away. I know that Councillor Thomas, you spoke to me a little while ago about sort of trying to think about places that they could go to. Am I right in thinking that the KCC are willing to give them to the town council to decide where to put them, or are they going to take them away from the town, or are we just got to come up with some idea about them? I know it sounds silly, but it's kind of because they're here. It kind of seems a shame if they take them away.
Okay, just to update on that one, they're not going to leave the town, put it like that. What KCC are proposing to experiment with at the moment, and it's not definitely confirmed because we just need to do a few more safety checks on it, is to, and this is something that came out of the discussion I had with Jeremy Watson this afternoon, is to slightly adjust the position of the planters on the side of the road that they're on at the moment, i.e. they will sit half on the curb and half over the road, so that will create extra space for traffic to get through. One of the planters would then move to the northern side of the road, but sit on the pavement, sit on the footpath, ideally at either end of the red strip that marks the gateway. And the reasoning for that is so it provides a clear definition that drivers are entering a different speed zone. Just got to do a little bit of a review to make sure that that planter on the northern side of the road isn't a problem for drivers coming out of Sainsbury's. I need to get up there myself, and maybe I'll get Chris to stand on the pavement and I'll try and drive out of Sainsbury's, and Chris can pretend he's a planter for a moment. And see what that looks like. I'm reasonably confident it'll be okay, but that is the current idea. It's by no means finalised, but that's what we'd like to do rather than move the planters too far away. We still like to have that gateway so that people know they're entering a different speed zone.
Thank you, that sounds good.
And I know it's important that we address people's concerns about the issue that the planters appear to have created on Bisingwood Road.
Definitely.
Okay, if everyone's happy with that and haven't got any other things they want to raise, I'm going to close the meeting. And thank you all for attending this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
You only put fireworks. Yes.